All right, what's up, everybody? We're here again. Another Gray Pages. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. So there is a TED Talk that I saw a long time ago. The TED Talk's actually about 15 years old. And there's a bunch about, I think it's one of the better TED Talks I've seen. It's by Dan Barber, and it's kind of a parable using, so he's like culinary world, and it's around this, a parable using foie gras. And I saw this years ago, was really into it for some other reasons, but recently rewatched it and thought, man, this really seems like something we should talk about. And I wanted to share that with Hugh and Taylor. And so here's what I think we can do is I'm going to go ahead and just screen share and share that video here. We're going to watch it together so that everyone kind of knows the content of the talk. And then we will just jump in and talk about it. How's that sound?
I was thinking for season 2, we just watch TED Talks every week.
Watch videos.
You know, I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
And then we just talk about them.
And whatever.
Let me just say to the audience,
Well,
to our little faithful audience,
14.
this, you don't want to miss this. Even if you've seen this TED Talk before, which I doubt you have, this might be the parable of brave cities right here. And I'll say this too. We had dinner with some friends the other night, and I must have referenced this TED Talk 6 times because it's really hard to convey. I guess I'll talk about this after the TED Talk, but it is hard to convey why we're so passionate about the things we're passionate about in contrast to kind of what we would call the empire, the way of empire.
Mm-hmm.
And this always seems to help. So yeah, we'll talk more about that.
All right, let's let it rip.
I went to Spain a few months ago, and I had the best foie gras of my life, the best culinary experience of my life. Because what I saw, I'm convinced, is the future of cooking. Ridiculous, right? I mean, foie gras and future of cooking. There's not a food today that's more maligned than foie gras, right? I mean, it's crucified. It was outlawed in Chicago for a little while. It's pending here in California and just recently in New York. It's like, if you're a chef and you put it on your menu, you risk being attacked. Really, it happened here in San Francisco to a famous chef. And I'm not saying that there's not a rationale for being opposed to foie gras. The reasons usually just whittle down to the gavage, which is the force feeding. Basically, you take a goose or a duck and you force feed a ton of grain down its throat. More grain in a couple of weeks than it would ever get in a lifetime. Its liver expands by 8 times. Suffice to say, it's not the prettiest picture of sustainable farming. The problem for us chefs is that it's so freaking delicious. I mean, I love the stuff. It is fatty, it's sweet, it's silky, it's unctuous. It makes everything else you put it with taste incredible. Can we produce a menu that's delicious without foie gras? Yeah, sure. You can also bike the Tour de France without steroids, right? Yeah. Not a lot of people are doing it, and for good reason. So a couple months ago, a friend of mine sent me this link to this guy, Eduardo Souza. Eduardo's doing what he calls natural foie gras. Natural foie gras. What's natural about foie gras? To take advantage of when the temperature drops in the fall, geese and ducks gorge on food to prepare for the harsh realities of winter, right? And the rest of the year, they're free to roam around Eduardo's land and eat what they want. So no gavage, no force feeding, no factory-like conditions, no cruelty. And it's shockingly not a new idea. His great-granddad started Pataria de Souza in 1812. And they've been doing it quietly ever since. That is, until last year, when Eduardo won the Coup de Coeur, the coveted French gastronomic prize. It's like the Olympics of food products. He placed first for his foie gras. Big, big problem. As he said to me, that really pissed the French off. Said it sort of gleefully. It was all over the papers. I read about it. It was in Le Monde. Spanish chef accused, and the French accused him, Spanish chef accused of cheating. They accused him of paying off the judges. They implicated actually the Spanish government, amazingly. Huh? Amazing. Huge scandal for a few weeks. Couldn't find a shred of evidence. You look at the guy, he doesn't look like a guy who's paying off French judges for his foie gras. So it died down, and then very soon afterwards, new controversy. He shouldn't win because it's not foie gras. It's not foie gras because it's not gavage. There's no force feeding. So by definition, he's lying and should be disqualified. As funny as it sounds articulated now and reading about it, actually, if we had talked about it before this controversy, I would have said, that's kind of true. You know, foie gras, by definition, force feeding, it's gavage, and that's what you get when you want foie gras. That is, until I went to Eduardo's farm in Extremadura, 50 miles north of Sevilla, right on the Portugal border. I saw firsthand a system that is incredibly complex, and then at the same time, everything beautiful in nature is utterly simple. And he said to me, really from the first moment, my MO, my life's work is to give the geese what they want. He repeated that about 50 times in the 2 days I was with him. I'm just here to give the geese what they want. Actually, when I showed up, he was lying down with the geese with his cell phone, taking pictures of them, like his children, in the grass. Amazing. He's really just in love with his geese. He's at one with it. He's the goose whisperer. And when I was speaking to him, I thought, like I'm speaking to you now, right? But after, sort of in the middle of my questions, my excited questions, because the more I got to know him and his system, the more excited this whole idea became, he kept going like this to me. And I thought, okay, excited Jew from New York, right? I'm talking a little too aggressively, whatever. So, I slowed down. And finally, by the end of the day, I was like, Eduardo, like this. But he was still going like this. And I figured it out. And I was speaking too loudly. So I hushed my voice. I kind of asked these questions and chatted with him through a translator in kind of half whisper. And he stopped doing this, and amazingly, the geese who were on the other side of the paddock when I was around, get the hell away from this kid, when I lowered my voice, they all came right up to us. Right up to us, right up to here, right along the fence line. And the fence line was amazing in and of itself. The fence, this conception of fence that we have, it's totally backward with him. The electricity on this fiberglass fence is only on the outside. He rewired it. He invented it. I've never seen it. Have you? You fence in animals. You electrify the inside. He doesn't. He electrifies only the outside. Why? Because he said to me that he felt like the geese, and he proved this actually, not just a conceit. He proved this, that the geese felt manipulated when they were imprisoned in their little paddock. Even though they were imprisoned in this Garden of Eden with figs and olives and everything else, he felt like they felt manipulated. So he got rid of the electricity, got rid of the current on the inside, and kept it on the outside so to protect them against coyotes and other predators. And what happened? They ate, and he showed me on a chart how they ate about 20% more feed to feed their livers. The landscape is incredible. I mean, his farm is incredible. It really is the Garden of Eden. There's figs and olives and everything else there for the taking. And it's the irony of ironies because Extremadura, the area, what does Extremadura mean? Extra hard land, right? Extra difficult, extra hard. But over 4 generations, he and his family have literally transformed this extra hard land into a tasting menu. of great delights for these geese. And they are allowed to take whatever they want. Another irony, the double irony, is that on the figs and the olives, Eduardo can make more money selling those than he can the foie gras. He doesn't care. He lets them take what they want, and he says, usually it's about 50%. They're very fair. The other 50%, he takes and he sells and he makes money on. Part of the income for his farm, a big part of his income for his farm. But he never controls it. They get what they want, they leave the rest for me, and I sell it. His biggest obstacle, really, was the marketplace, which demands these days bright yellow foie gras. That's how I've been trained. You want to look and see what good foie gras is, it's got to be bright yellow. It's the indication that it's best foie gras. Well, because he doesn't force feed, because he doesn't gavage tons of corn, his livers were pretty gray, or they were. But he found this wild plant called the lupin bush. Lupin bush, it's all around Extremadura. He let it go to seed. He took the seeds, he planted it on his 30 acres, all around. And the geese love the lupin bush, not for the bush, but for the seeds. And when they eat the seeds, their foie gras turns yellow. Radioactive yellow, bright yellow. Of the highest quality foie gras yellow I've ever seen. So I'm listening to all this, and I'm like, is this guy for real? Is he making some of this up? Is he like, what? Because he seemed to have an answer for everything, and it was always nature. It was never him. It was always like, and I always like, I don't know, I always get a little like weirded out by people who deflect everything away from themselves, because really like they want you to look at themselves, right? But he deflected everything away from his ingenuity into working with his landscape. So it's like, here I am like on the fence about this guy, but increasingly eating up his every word. And we're sitting there, and I hear, like from a distance, I look over, and he grabs my arm, and the translator, and ducks us under a bush. Says, "Watch this." Shh, says again, for the 500th time to me, "Shh, watch this." There's a squadron of geese come over. And they're loud, getting louder, 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 like really loud, right over us. And like airport traffic control, as they start to go past us, they're called back. Shh. And they're called back and back and back. And then they circle around. And his geese are calling up now to the wild geese. And the wild geese are calling down. And it's getting louder and louder. And then they circle and circle and they land. And I'm just like, no way. No way. And I look at Eduardo, who's near tears looking at this. And I say, you're telling me that your geese are calling to the wild geese to say, come for a visit? And he says, no. They come to stay. They come to stay? It's like the DNA of a goose is to fly south in the winter, right? I said that. I said, isn't that what they're put on this earth for? Fly south in the winter and north when it gets warmer? I said, no. Their DNA is to find the conditions that are conducive to life, to happiness. They find it here. They don't need anything more. They stop, they mate with his domesticated geese, and his flock continues. Think about that for a minute. That's brilliant, right? I mean, imagine a hog farm in like North Carolina, and a wild pig comes upon a factory farm and decides to stay. So how did it taste? We finally got to taste it before I left. He took me to his neighborhood restaurant, and he served me some of his foie gras, confit foie gras. It was incredible. And the problem with saying that, of course, is that, at this point, it like risks hyperbole like really easily. And I'd like to make a metaphor, but I don't have one really. I was drinking this guy's Kool-Aid so much, like he could have served me goose feathers, and I would have been like, this guy's a genius. I'm really in love with him at this point. But it truly was the best foie gras of my life, so much so that I don't think I had ever really had foie gras until that moment. I had something that was called foie gras. But this was transformative, really transformative. And I say to you, I might not stick to this, but I don't think I'll ever serve foie gras on my menu again. because of that taste experience with Eduardo. It was sweet, it was unctuous, had all the qualities of foie gras, but its fat had a lot of integrity and a lot of honesty, and you could taste herbs, you could taste spices. I mean, I kept saying, I said, I swear to God I tasted star anise. I was sure of it, and I'm not like some super taster, but I can taste things. There's 100% star anise is enough. And then I started like going down the spices, and then finally I was like, okay, salt and pepper. Thinking, he salted and peppered his liver, but no. He takes the liver when he harvests the foie gras, he sticks them in this jar, and he confits it. No salt, no pepper, no oil, no spices. I said, what? He said, we went back out for the final tour of the farm, and he showed me the wild pepper plants and the plants that he made sure exist on his farm for salinity. He doesn't need salt and pepper, and he doesn't need spices because he's got this potpourri of herbs and flavors that his geese love to gorge on. I turned to him like sort of at the end of the meal, and it's a question I'd asked several times. He kind of hadn't answered me directly, but I said at the end of the meal, look, you're in Spain. Some of the greatest chefs in the world are in Ferran Adria, the preeminent chef of the world today, not that far from you. How come you don't give him this? How come no one's really heard of you? And it may be because of the wine or maybe because of my excitement, he answered me directly and he said, because chefs don't deserve my foie gras. And he was right. He was right. Chefs take foie gras and they make it their own. They create a dish where all the vectors point at us. With Eduardo, it's about the expression of nature. And as he said, I think fittingly, it's a gift from God, with God saying, you've done good work. Simple. I flew home. I'm on the flight with my little black book. I took, pages and pages of notes about him. I really was moved. And in the corner of one of my notes is this note that says, when asked, what do you think of conventional foie gras? What do you think of foie gras that 99.9999% of the world eats? He said, I think it's an insult to history. And I wrote, insult to history. And I'm on the plane, and I'm just tearing my hair out. It's like, why didn't I follow up on that? What the hell does that mean? Insult to history. So I did some research when I got back, and here's what I found. The history of foie gras. Jews invented foie gras. True story. True story. By accident. They were looking for an alternative to schmaltz. Gotten sick of the chicken fat. They're looking for an alternative. And they saw in the fall that there was this natural, beautiful, sweet, delicious fat from geese. And they slaughtered them and used the fat throughout the winter for cooking. The Pharaoh got wind of this. This is true. Right off the internet. The Pharaoh got... I swear to God. Pharaoh got wind of this and wanted to taste it. He tasted it, fell in love with it. He started demanding it. And he didn't want it just in the fall. He wanted it all year round. And he demanded that the Jews supply enough for everyone. And the Jews, fearing for their life, had to come up with an ingenious idea, or at least try and satisfy the Pharaoh's wishes, of course. And they invented what? Gavage. They invented gavage in a great moment of fear for their lives. And they provided the Pharaoh with gavaged liver and the good stuff they kept for themselves, supposedly anyway. I believe that one. That's the history of foie gras. And if you think about it, it's the history of industrial agriculture. It's the history of what we eat today. Most of what we eat today. Mega farms, feedlots, chemical amendments, long distance travel, food processing, all of it, our food system. That's also an insult to history. It's an insult to the basic laws of nature and of biology. Whether we're talking about beef cattle, or we're talking about chickens, or we're talking about broccoli, or Brussels sprouts, or, in the case of this morning's New York Times, catfish. which wholesale going out of business. Whatever it is, it's a mindset that is reminiscent of General Motors. It's rooted in extraction. Take more, sell more, waste more. And for the future, it won't serve us. Jonas Salk has a great quote. He said, "If all the insects disappeared, life on Earth as we know it would disappear within 50 years. If human beings disappeared, life on Earth as we know it would flourish." And he's right. We need now to adopt a new conception of agriculture, really new. One in which we stop treating the planet as if it were some kind of like business and liquidation, and stop degrading resources under the guise of cheap food. We can start by looking to farmers like Eduardo, farmers that rely on nature for solutions, for answers, rather than imposing solutions on nature. Listening, as Janine Banyos, one of my favorite writers and thinkers about this topic, says, listening to nature's operating instructions. That's what Eduardo does, and does so brilliantly. And what he showed me, and what he can show all of us, I think, is that the great thing for chefs, the great blessing for chefs, and for people that care about food and cooking, is that the most ecological choice for food is also the most ethical choice for food, whether we're talking about Brussels sprouts or foie gras. And it's also almost always, and I haven't found an example otherwise, but almost always the most delicious choice. That's serendipitous. Thank you.
That was good, huh?
I love, probably more than anything else, I love the word unctuous.
Unctuous.
It's a good word.
It's a great word.
Can you tell us the actual definition and etymology of unctuous?
I actually don't know. I was wondering that myself, like even as he said it, I'm like, do I know unctuous? Let's see. Unctuous.
So unctuous means excessively or ingratiatingly flattering, oily. Having a greasy or soapy feel. I like being
That's
unctuous
like
personally.
On a pizza, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's fatty, oily,
Yeah,
smooth.
duck liver. That's what you would want. You wouldn't want a dry, powdery duck liver. You'd want an unctuous duck liver. Why
Try
do
to
you
pull that mic.
so
Hugh,
much?
pull
Well,
that mic
Why
a
do you
little
think
closer.
it's so central?
To be clear, I've never had foie gras. I'm hoping to. But now I only want to have Eduardo's. So
Yeah, by the way,
that's-
if you pull up their website, it's nothing in stock. Like not just this product, all products.
yeah.
It
Yeah,
reminds me of the book, The Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks.
Yeah.
It's the same
Mm.
ideology. It's just excellence, and they can't keep anything in stock. Because people know it's such high quality what they're doing.
There's a longing inside of every human being that I've ever been around, even the ones that are so given over to power and empire. There's a longing. It's almost like the reason, it's found in kind of our vacation choices, where we go and why we go there, is we want something that Eduardo has found, that Jesus taught about, that that we've experienced in little pockets of travel or of momentary pain when family comes together, when community comes together, of outings that we go on, whether it's like going camping or hunting or some kind of trip where we get into the wild. It's this longing for purity and for yes, I would say excellence, but it's not excellence in the way that like I come from the music world. It's not excellence in
It's correctness, it's rightness. Like,
yeah.
there's something right here.
Yeah.
I was like, what I loved is that like whenever we try to talk about ecosystems, it's funny how many people roll their eyes when you say, well, we view church and life like an ecosystem. They kind of do the, because they think it's a semantic, well, you're just talking about kind of church and business. And I always want something where I can explain, no, there's like some weird rightness. When you see a really good kingdom ecosystem, it smells right, like the nuances are correct. And then it's so easy when you come into another network that's wanting to do, and they're just trying to pump something out or grow it or sell it. And you go, no, I mean, it has a lot of the same
Yeah.
look, but it just doesn't feel right.
You
It's hard to describe that.
go ahead, John.
By the way, no, that's exactly what came to mind when, so it says he won that like major competition, that pissed the French off. And then they started saying like, he shouldn't win because it's not foie gras. And it actually made me think about like in some of the interactions, like we've had with folks where they might ask about the ecosystem thing. Like, how is this church?
It's not church.
It's not church. It's not foie gras. And like it just resembled that question in some really powerful way to me. Like it's like that parallel seemed clear. But you're right. They like it is, but his is done in some sense, like with one in partnership with nature. And the things that stood out to me about the posture was really interesting. Like he said, he never controls, right? He like just loves the geese, allows, like lets them take their half, like whatever they leave is what I work with.
Pause with that.
Yep.
That's a really hard concept. Very difficult. So we could even maybe get a little personal in all of our contexts. We've all been in probably 5 different contexts between the 3 of us. We're in 2 different contexts right now because Hugh and I are kind of working together. But even here, we're doing very different things. It's really difficult. See, what I don't like about this story or this parable or this TED Talk is we don't get to hear much of the despair. And I have a feeling that his great grandfather, I believe is who he said began this work.
Started it,
Is that
yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I bet he went through serious times of despair.
Totally, probably was
Broke, confused.
The land was actually named Hard Land. Like, I don't know if you
Okay.
caught that, but he talked
didn't
about the
catch it.
place and he's like, yeah, that means hard land. It means very difficult.
Good catch.
No, I didn't see that because we were listening to it a little faster than normal. But I never liked that. That's my one critique, and it's not a bad critique of the talk because he needed to present it the way that he did. I would love to hear. It seems that Eduardo inherited something that was developed for a couple of
Like,
generations.
do you think he was able to, he said his life's work was only to give the geese what they wanted or needed.
Yeah.
Do you think he was underwritten by dad's work? Like, do you think he had the struggle of trying to sell anything?
I do. I think he was underwritten. So I went to a place recently I've shared with you guys about in Arizona, and it's been going for quite a while. And I mean, I left and I almost, like, I genuinely wanted to move there. And I think that it's kind of if you watch the TED Talk, you remember the scene. I'm skipping ahead, but I love this when the geese started clapping,
Amazing.
calling in the other geese,
Mhm.
right?
And they come to stay.
And he
Yeah.
said, "Oh, they're coming for a visit," and he's
Right.
like, "No, they come to stay." Even in my context, now currently, I don't feel like we're working on what's called hard land, what I would call hard
Mhm.
land. And
Mhm.
I don't know that we have an ecosystem that all geese would want to come and stay in.
Correct.
I think there's nuance there, but the interesting thing about like the world outside of Eduardo's ecosystem is there's far more geese, far more in the world outside of Eduardo's ecosystem than within.
Mhm.
And if it was, you know, as seemingly perfection as it's conveyed, all geese would come. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to start with everyone and going, what we just heard about was a multi-generational yield that the fathers and the grandfathers that came before Eduardo more than likely suffered a great deal of loss, confusion, despair, and incredibly hard work to develop what's the fella's name that gave the talk?
Dan Barber.
To convey what Dan Barber, but you all know, all three of us can testify. We've had Dan Barbers come into our contexts and leave going, I've never seen anything like this.
Mhm.
And I have no idea how to go in and reproduce this in a formatted mathematical way.
Oh yeah, like this, and by the way, it's 4 generations, I think was implied in the talk. He said it was his great grandfather that started it, the farm or the business even in 1812. So it is like this family legacy,
That
right?
actually helps me more than anything.
It's a little
Like, to know that-
discouraging.
No, for me, it's not discouraging because like, I'm the type that would just like the insto.
Yeah. Which is
Perfect.
what Pharaoh wanted, right?
I mean, I'd like to. just
Well,
get
hold
that
on,
out,
that's-
or I'd like geese to start flying. And,
Yes, so let's save that for the end.
Okay.
Yeah,
But if I knew we were setting this up,
yeah,
I'm fine with that. Like, I just want to know that
But-
we're over the target zone.
but we
Mhm.
don't know. That's what I'm saying.
So,
Is
but-
I think his great grandfather died
Not knowing,
not knowing.
just
And I would say that is,
sitting out on his hard land going, what the crap?
yeah,
Totally.
But just somehow, for some reason, just loves geese, maybe. Like,
But here's the problem.
Now
We-
you-
we've
now you're getting
seen the
to it.
video and we see the writings in scripture, we see the life of Jesus. It's clear he cares more about the quality of the ecosystem than the product of the ecosystem. Like,
and
so we have to work on the quality.
that's right. So that, and I think the two kind of cornerstone ideas are that and what John just said. Do we actually love the work? So my only hack to this whole journey, if I think back did you say 4 generations?
yeah, great grandfather.
Is that great grandfather actually wasn't that concerned with making some kind of, you know, TED Talk impact. And that's tough for me. This is a process I'm directly sitting in. Like, this is a pool I'm currently sitting in right now. Are you okay with not making some sort of TED Talk impact with the ecosystem? And I don't know that I am. Sometimes I'm like, man, I think we can do more than this. We can, and it seems like I suppose that if we could go back to, you know, Eduardo the First and go, hey man, what do you think about what this is going to mean for the world in 170 years? I presume he would say, I don't think about that at all.
I don't care.
I love the geese. I love the work. My joy is in what I'm doing every day.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And yet when you say things like we could do more, that resonates, but in a different way. Like, so rather than like what it leads to or impact or outcomes, which I do think is like, that isn't up to us. But then also like one of the things that stood out to me in the talk. So for example, was he reversed the electric fence,
Yep.
right? So he doesn't electrify the inside, but the outside, which I could just muse on for forever.
Right.
And even the turn of phrase he used about being imprisoned in a Garden of Eden, just I feel like so significant about freedom and whatever. But
Right.
it to the work, like we could do more. It's like how the table's set.
Yeah.
Like we put these other flowers out here. We did these other things. Like there's always like he is doing more. Like let's get the yellow flowers. Let's protect this environment and electrify the outside of the fence. And at that level, there's so much more we could do in service of stewarding the ecosystem, loving the geese. But I think you're right. Like there is probably some real detachment, even though like it's very clear there's a detachment from outcome because he relies on selling the stuff that grows there, but he only comes in after they have what they want.
Yeah.
And he sells what's left.
Yeah,
Which-
the fence thing is unbelievable because guys, everything about this story is the opposite of empire.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, it actually is the opposite of what we would call the prevailing model of church as we know it.
Exactly.
Everything about that is centered. See, the Eduardo character is centered on cultivating and creating a beautiful ecosystem, uncovering the kingdom, as we would say it.
Yep.
And keeping predators out.
Yeah.
Predators would be, so what are predators? I would love to walk through this with a group and go.
Predators to Jesus was pretty clear. It was people that act like they're gonna shepherd you, but they're gonna actually wolf you. So he said, watch out, hirelings. Look out for the people that want to get in the easy way.
Yeah.
And he said, watch out for the leaven of the Pharisee, which is the religious spirits of the day. It's legalism.
Yeah.
So he did say, like, electric fence that out of there, which I think is the predominant majority of people that actually sit in churches. Which is the hard thing to grapple with. It's Jesus going, hey, watch out for, because the leaven of the Pharisee were people that thought that they knew all the stuff, but then they heap yokes upon people, judgment, whatever. So like, that begs the question, would Jesus say, like, you have to go small, quality, natural, you can't let any of this, like, these people are just looking for a sermon, like, you can't let them in there.
I completely agree. I think a deeper level to take it past the people is just the spirits, the powers, the spirit of judgment, the spirit of greed. I mean, he said he is totally content with making 50%.
Which is anti-consumerism.
Right. So it wasn't even the 50%. I liked the 50% number because it reminded me of the great commandment of, love your neighbor as yourself. So it's this equality, like 50 here, 50 here. But what I liked more was just the fact that he's like, look, I'm going to produce. I mean, how many times have I sat around and said, we could make so much more money in our ecosystem if we did this, this, and this? But the truth is, if I clear the scales from my eyes on a daily basis, I recognize that God is providing everything that we need. And it's there to be used by whoever wants it. It's just not in abundance for us to hoard. And he was content with that, with going, yeah, if it's 50, if it's 40, I want to give the geese what they need. So that the spirit of greed, the spirit of control, I would say power and control in one. It almost looked like he was the servant of the geese, like the geese ruled. But I wouldn't draw some kind of parallel between leadership and patron in that idea. I would say that that all who tend the ecosystem are
I
servants.
was gonna say, he was still tending the process.
Yeah.
There was definitely that. I, just in case, you know, maybe some people haven't read the Brave City book, this is why, like, when we talked about as you're acting inside the ecosystem, the things that you actually have to pay attention to, one of them we said are disciples. And that's all we were trying to get at, is Jesus talked about, it was always the character of a disciple, it wasn't the multiplying. Like we would, in our vernacular, we would always say, you know, you multiply disciples, and it's like we think about the number of them.
Mm.
Where Jesus, he never talked about the number of them. He always talked about, you will be salt, you will be light.
Well, one of the things, so that's a great segue. I wanted to ask you guys, and this is kind of rhetorical, but think about it, and then I'll give my thoughts and y'all respond. But the question, the very first thing I wrote down was, we're looking for the Eduardos. And I've thought about this for a long time with who Jesus chose. We know that he chose 12 men. We know that he chose some women. We don't know exactly how many. It varies, but let's just say it was around 15 to 18 people that he kind of said, come with me. Now, there's all of these different ideas or concepts as to why he picked these people. Most people love to go the route of, he picked them because they were the lowest of society, or they didn't,
The dummies.
the dummies or something like that. I think he saw this in them. So I think even that picking, however we want to draw that parallel, this is what I want your thoughts on, is when we're trying to cultivate an Eduardo, is it not one of the most frustrating things trying to, no pun intended, but trying to force feed kingdom?
We always say, like, it's hard to find people that have the natural passion.
Yeah.
Like we find good workers, but then they get tired of working. The only ones that seem to make it long term are people that somehow are guided by some internal passion. And I think we're finding it's hard to find kind of the natural passionaries out there.
And what if there was such an example from Jesus of the choosing? We know this. We know that he was an older man, let's say around age 30, when he chose 12 men to walk with him. We have to assume that he knew these guys. He didn't travel, across seas to find them. So we have to assume that he had observed them. He had seen their talents, whether it was the way that they worked, the way they were with their families, the tax collectors, who's that? Matthew, the zealots, even down to Judas Iscariot. Everyone, I would say, every one of them had a particular insight or longing or gifting that he saw as exceptional. They weren't completely entrenched in the ways of empire. So even in the disciple conversation, I'm reaching this point in my life where I want to tell leaders, kingdom cultivators, whatever, like, be very careful how much you try to force feed the way of Eduardo in this parable. A lot of people just don't want it,
What
man.
would be the alternative, though, if you don't try to, lead, try to really cast the vision, get the, and like,
So what comes to mind for me, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
What comes to mind for me is modeling. Like, it's like he was embodying Eduardo here. I mean, it's a little different trying to map this to Jesus choosing disciples. And so I get where but like, so much of what I'm hearing in this and trying to map over to that in many of our own context is actually setting the table that that longing is like awakened. And so like in the rat, it's not force feeding, it's invitation. It's not force feeding, it's making a space for them. It's setting the table for them, creating the garden for them. Like, and they kind of sniff it out, you know? Now that isn't to say those are the like only those people that have that in them, but like how do you can't force feed it, but you can model it.
Same as a Trappist, they don't go out and recruit. No recruiting. They know that people know their way of life, and if they want to like figure out the spirituality in their form because they're drawn to it, they can show up and
And their doors open,
All
total
neighborhood.
hospitality, right? Yeah. You could come and stay.
They're not recruiting for sure.
But it's amazing to me how the guy doing the TED Talk, if you research this, he's not even close to a minority of people who have raved about this foie gras, and even the other organics that come out of this garden, out of his farmland. It's known globally, yet the overwhelming majority still continue to do it the way that Pharaoh wanted. This is maybe top of the spectrum of thoughts in this whole
And
talk.
so
And
you're not trying to compete with those. You just have to decide, this is the way we want to live.
there's no competition.
Yeah.
But the fact that he threw that in was so perfect. I don't think he knew how much that spoke to us.
Right.
The fact that he ended the talk with the contrast between kingdom and empire, that the Jewish people were who discovered this form of this delicacy, and that Pharaoh wanted it so fast and so much and in such excess that he said, you have to figure out a way that is not natural, that is against the organic and natural way of God, to get it to me as often as I want it. And it requires force feeding, it requires unhealth, and it requires you to go against your conscience and what you think is right to get this to me because this is what I want. That's an unbelievable ending to this whole talk. Go ahead, man.
No, I mean, it is, I think it is what made me initially send it to you, is just like such an amazing illustration of like, I mean, exactly what you're saying. And under the fear of death. So power says like, you're going to do this, you're going to create. So it's like, I have an expectation as much as I want, as often as I want, no concern for nature, for seasons, for ethics. And what's crazy is like, even the title of this talk, like a parable of foie gras, whatever, it's like, bring up foie gras just about anywhere. It's notoriously an unethical food. Like foie gras
Right.
means cruelty.
Oh, it does?
Oh yeah, like people are. It is
No.
like,
No, the word means cruelty.
no. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just like
In
even in
people's
the opening
minds.
song,
Yeah,
it's like it
that's
was
right.
outlawed in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like it is the it's brand.
Process.
It's got brand issues. Let's say.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, it's known for being something terrible. Incidentally, kind of in many of our like actual broader culture around our cities, so is Christian.
Right. Well, so this is what I would say. So is Christian and so is church. So it's interesting. I hate that I keep doing this. What's the guy's name again?
Dan.
It's interesting that Dan, I'm guessing he has a culinary background.
Is like, yeah.
He admitted that he didn't think this was foie gras. So he goes in and he goes, this isn't, I understand why people would say this isn't foie gras, why he shouldn't win the award. There's no, is it called gavage to force feed?
Mm-hmm.
Then by the end, let's say after his eyes had been opened, and this is how I feel about a kingdom ecosystem as church. Once his eyes had been opened, he goes, this is only foie gras. Now he won't have foie gras on his menu,
Right.
because he's saying this is not foie gras. it is a counterfeit version. But listen, and this is what I tried to explain to this family who we were in a beautiful conversation about all of this. Super encouraging, super edifying. But just because you feel fulfilled and satisfied after you eat foie gras, catch the analogy, doesn't mean it's foie gras. Don't be deceived. There's a lot that has happened and has gone into this process to give you that feeling that has caused so much damage and so much net loss. And anybody in their right minds would look at what Eduardo is doing, which is exactly what was said to me, and would say, don't you want to scale this? Don't you want to get this into the hands of the greatest chefs in the world? Now, I don't know that I would know how to say this properly because I don't know that I feel this way. But I love what Eduardo said when he said they don't deserve this. I don't want to give them this. And you and I have talked about this, John. I think we have too. But this is kind of I'm giving it to y'all now. But I feel this way sometimes. I don't want to give this. I don't want to go there and talk about this, because what they're going to do is they're going to take this. You know, the yellow plant.
Yeah.
The yellow plant thing is amazing to me because people didn't like the color of the foie gras, so he discovered the yellow plant to make it, instead of gray, to make it yellow.
That's what people would key in on. They go, oh, all we gotta do is just go get the yellow.
Just go get the yellow plant. The problem is it fit perfectly in the ecosystem. So you want to skip step 1 through 94 and just go buy the yellow plant and put it in a greenhouse to turn your foie gras yellow to look like what Eduardo does. It doesn't work. You can't do it. And so many people will come to us and go, I did what y'all are doing, but it's not working. I started a coffee shop. I moved into a poor neighborhood. I blah, blah, blah. No, bro, you're just buying the yellow plant. None of that is what we're talking about. None of that is even a step. The step is to begin tilling the soil on the hard land. And 20 years in,
Figure out what's natural in your.
you realize, oh, it's actually red plants. I'm not doing foie gras. I'm doing this. Red plants are springing up from the soil. They're creating this. They're causing this kind of growth and development. So my thought was him saying they don't deserve. That sounds like an arrogant statement. And I don't think it was arrogant at all when he said they don't deserve this foie gras. Why do you think he said that?
Well, what came to mind immediately is pearls before swine. First of all, like that idea, like don't cast your pearls before swine, but also like, so in what he says in the talk is like, because the chefs will take this and make it about themselves, where all vectors will point to themselves. And in contrast, he said he deflects everything away from his ingenuity to the landscape itself. He points back to the ecosystem itself. And so there's like this sacredness around this thing. And like it so maps over to like you could almost,
because if he did sell it even to world-renowned chefs and they misused it, it was a corruption of his own conscience. Like
he would have to violate the ethic, correct, to even do that.
He's like, I can't. That's why I can't do this.
Right. And it's so powerful. Like, as you think about this parallel with kind of like church stuff, where it's like it makes me wonder, because it's like the way you're like, I don't want to go there and talk about this. It does kind of map to that, especially in certain contexts where you're like, yeah, no, this is just like empire. This can't be done within empire. It's not like, oh, just plug in this other thing. It's like deep kind of tilling of the soil conversion or whatever that's taking place. And so I think like them not deserving it is like, oh, it's an entirely like it's like, it's in force feed land. It's in empire. It can't exist in that. And it's too sacred to do that with. And then when you come back to him going, I don't think I'll ever put it on the menu again.
Yep.
is I think that it's like, okay, now I've recognized that thing that's sacred. And actually, then you might find that we don't do that thing because of the cruelty, the product of empire, the bastardization, it's not really what you thought it was to begin with.
Yep.
And it was only made known by encountering
True
the
for
real,
God.
the truth,
You know what?
the
You know
integrity.
you know what is the worst experience for any foie gras lover is to go there and experience the whole thing, the whole ecosystem. Because even when he was saying it was the best foie gras I've ever had, we know that taste is tied to many other things. Like a steak in a beautiful restaurant with a partner that you love, a husband or wife that you love, with music and laughter and friends, tastes better than a steak in your truck on the same steak in your truck on the road trip or whatever, right? Taste is tied to a lot of things. So even when he said that, I was like, what you're tasting right now is not just the foie gras. You're tasting like Eduardo's work, what you've seen, what you smell, the sounds of this, all of it. Once you experience that, truly, you can't really go back. But what if you love foie gras like he does? Now you're having to live the rest of your life going, I just want that again. And what I would tell him is then cultivate it. Cultivate it where you are. You might get a little before you die. It might take,
But your
35 years.
great grandbabies might
But
be
go
exactly,
in-
yeah, right.
And part of the Brave Cities like dream is that we have these ecosystems all over the world that are interconnected, learning from each other, visiting, growing, challenging. But that Eduardo seems to be a unique and special guy, probably a fourth generation result of amazing parenting and mothers and fathers that held a standard that he just is now
He's also a
living in.
product of an ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But like, I wonder if his great grandfather was connected to others that did something like this. I wonder if he wasn't, would it have been better for him? Would it have been more encouraging for him if there was some sort of relational, stability that he had in other ecosystems that were working towards something like this? I just think that the magnetism of empire is so strong, even in my own life, that without the ecosystem itself, and then the men and women that are cultivating around the world, to endure to the end is a tough ask for anyone. Does
That's
that make
interesting.
sense?
It does. It's interesting you use the word magnetism of empire. I want to like, so I'll just tell you what happened in my mind because I was thinking like it's pervasive. So it's like I don't know that I would use the word magnetism like as it's appealing or drawing in, but it is what the water we're swimming in. It is it's pervasive. It's our culture. It's like in our so it's really hard to kind of go against the grain of it or to like come out of her, so to speak. But I was, when you use the word magnetism, I was like, no. The ecosystem was what was magnetic. Like where geese are going to turn around from migration. They're like, this is in their DNA. He's like, no, what's in their DNA is just to find what's conducive to life and health and happiness. And they find that here and they stay. And I'm like, so just like, that's the thing in this that feels like real, like the kingdom has magnetism. But in empire, I think more resembles like has, I don't know, a hold of us, like an addiction, in some way. Like it's hard to recover enough to fully come into the kingdom ecosystem, right? To get those hooks out of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking we should probably do a full podcast on this. We're gonna be sharing a little bit of a story with the Tampa Underground Network here in a week about why we didn't sell this building. Right after this meeting, we're meeting with a second person that has interest in buying the building. But the reason why we ended up not selling it, and again, we probably need a whole podcast to set up the story. Was really, I think it's about the quality of the ecosystem, the original vision, and even our desire to go create some other stuff made us open to, maybe we should sell this building. We have a lot of equity in it, but we don't have a lot of cash to go do stuff we want to do. And, but at the end of the day, we had to hit the eject button because more like this is a sacred space. Like we can't just give this thing as much as we want to go do other sacred things.
Yep.
You literally can't just do one sellout to go make, like, everything you're doing and everything you've done becomes really important. So, I keep trying to figure out what's the lesson learning in this. Why are we open to hearing this next guy's thoughts? And why will we probably not sell it? It'll have to do with the quality of what's been produced or what's being worked through right now. I mean, we were trying to make the decision based on money and we just screwed up. We just lost a whole bunch of money again. But we couldn't not stick with kind of the intuitive, like, no, there's something wrong about the vision, about the spirit of these other people that want the building. We just don't think they're gonna do the right thing. And
Yep.
you wouldn't make that decision if you were just thinking business. You go, no, we got a buyer. We can actually sell this thing and take a breather. We were talking about a cruise for the team. Like, no, I guess we're not doing that.
Well, that's
So-
part of I like what you said, John. I think it's right. You might remember this from the book. That's kind of part of the magnetism. I use that word a lot because of how it struck me. There's a section in the book we call the hammer, the table, and the grandmother. And in it, this is a part that we wrote just really quick, and I'll tie it to that. But I said, so the hammer is where discipleship is forged. It's where we model. It's where our lives are reproduced. And what we really value is shown. Did you know that in sword making, it says you are to heat the metal to a non-magnetic temperature so that it is pliable and it hardens the material, creating wear resistance and significantly stronger resilience. It reminds me of the draw that Babylon constantly is in our lives, or empire. It's the work, the pain and suffering, the grind that heats us to a non-magnetic temperature, creates pliability, and develops the resilience and endurance needed for a kingdom life. And like all these little things that we go through, they actually are super painful. And you kind of get tired of them. But then you look around, and I would say Hugh is an example for me to reference. You look around and you go, there's so few people making it to the end that don't go. And
don't assume I'm gonna make it.
I'm not. I think you've made it this far, though. I know.
58 as of yesterday.
Yep. I know enough about you to know you've made it this far, and I go. And this is not a judgment, because making it to the end has very little, if anything, to do for us with this like heaven or hell conversation. It's more of, are you still cultivating that thing that you became obsessed with in your 20s? And I think it's fair to say that the overwhelming majority of people that we know would go, nah, not really. I'm kind of just coasting now.
Cheryl and I were talking about you and Lynn's last night, because we were talking about people that can't, they would love to quit, but they can't quit. Like the McCalls don't have, you have moments where I know, like,
Daily.
in that moment, Taylor may go off the bridge, but they can't not keep living according to their passion. Even if it took you down to the very nubs of your life, you would go, they're just, it is,
It sucks.
but those are the Eduardos, honestly. So like, when we think about like apostolic leaders for kingdom ecosystems, we really are thinking like, we want to spend our time with the 1%.
Yeah.
It's
people
a
who
very
can't
small
not-
percentage of
yeah.
humans that go, yeah, it hasn't been working for 30 years, but I just can't not
Mm-hmm.
keep doing, like, we're gonna keep taking swings at the bat, even though I'm 0 for 59, you know?
Yeah, I would say that the Eduardos of the world are the apostolic prophetic cultivators. And I thought about this because how stupid it sounds. The geese are not a great parallel because obviously we don't want to kill, but it is a great parable in that they are actually the ones setting the table. They're the ones feeding. Like if someone said to me personally, what is your life's work? What do you just want to do? I would say I just want to cultivate the garden. I want to keep it. I want to make sure that everything is there for everyone to have what they need. So when people say, hey, just come and work in the bike shop, I'm like, I'll do that, but I don't think you want me to do that. I want to cultivate the city because we want to all create a space where everyone feels welcome. We can clap our hands and bring them in. We can constantly be innovating ideas to keep out predatorial spirits, So I just love it, man. I told my wife this morning, I think I need to listen to this parable once a week because and that's what I mean by you said it better, John, but when I say the magnetism of empire, it feels unbearable at times.
Mm-hmm.
Did you call it a disease, an addiction?
Addiction. That's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it is. It's like if you've ever faced actual addiction, alcohol, narcotics, pornography,
It's also something you can't not do. Right.
it's always there. It's so pervasive. You see it. And I know I have very good friends that are like, hey, if y'all are drinking, it's better that I not come. And I love you guys. I'm not there yet where I can even be around it. You can't escape empire. It's on every shelf in every room.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you can become a separatist. That's why I always say I think maybe the Amish got it right. But they're not doing what Jesus said, be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we're here now.
That last point, remember at the end of the video, I talked about the extraction methods,
Mm-hmm.
where Jesus's incarnational pull back in. It's not extractive. It's not like get out of this thing.
Hold on, go deeper in that. I missed that part of
the incarnation is to become flesh, to enter in.
Right.
Emmanuel, God with us. The methods that it was even referring to, like the farming of today, it's an extractive method. We're going to take what's natural out of the soil and we're going to add unnatural.
Right. So he's doing the opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's actually doing an incarnational, like it's all in. Hey, I actually think I want to use that video as we reboot our season 2 of the Lantern Network. Like I want all of our staff to watch it.
So
Like
good.
new employees, baristas. Like I think it's a great, like I'm glad we did this because I think it will always be there. We'll go one of our plumb lines that we all listen to just to keep our wits about us is this foie gras thing. So we hope it's a good resource to y'all as you set culture in your ecosystem. Yeah. I don't know what we'll call it.
Hey, yeah, say a closing thought, John, and then Hugh's gonna have a name.
I'm just glad we did this. I don't know that I got some like word of wisdom. I guess one of the other lines that I don't think we mentioned, but the idea and he's on the plane headed home and he has these notes and he's like, insult to history. What is that?
Yeah.
What does
Yeah.
that mean? And it just it just really hits me of like, how many things, like even as you were talking about, well, we decided not to sell the building. And as you're talking about why, I'm like, because you want to honor the sacredness and also what's been invested. And especially he wasn't just talking about the history from granddad.
Bro, don't you think like, look, this is, I'll offend whoever for the sake of saying this. When you walk into what people call church now, and God love them because almost all of their hearts are good.
Mhm.
And it's over. You walk in, you do it sometimes. You walk in, everybody's doing their thing, the lights go down, you sing your songs, you hear a quick empowering message, and then you leave. Definitively, that is an insult to history.
Right.
That's an insult to what the stream that we call ourselves a part of. And that's got to be what Eduardo was talking about.
I've often bucked about the word church, right? I've been like, I don't want to use this word or whatever, but actually like even on the back of what you just said, and I've been thinking lately, like maybe it's also appropriate that we came up with a word that's entirely different from the original idea of assembly, the original idea of like, the town hall, because, it isn't that.
Yeah.
Also, right? And so it's like, I don't know, something I've almost come around, not that I want to be using it, but like also that I'm like, maybe that's for the best. Like maybe it's appropriate that it's called something entirely different. And like I don't need to worry about that, get back to this other thing. But like the idea that it is an insult to ecclesia of history, like of the first couple centuries, is just I can't imagine it's not obvious to anyone, even if we love doing that. Like I'm gonna go to a church on Sunday with some friends, and it's a great chance to be with some folks and to hear a hear a word and celebrate a little bit. It's like it's fine.
Fine. Totally
Yeah,
fine.
it's fine.
Yep. That's not the point. Yep.
Yeah, like I would eat some like if you had some foie gras that didn't come from Eduardo, like I'd probably try it. Like I'm sure it's good. You know what I mean? Like that's
You're not evil. You're not evil for eating it. You're not stupid. You're not wrong. But you at least need to know that it's an insult to history.
acknowledge it. Yep.
Oh, there's a encouraging way to end.
I think we title it insult to history. So this one will really blow
So
up.
whether or not you put church ... insult to history. We'll let you decide that, John. Maybe something has to go in front of
You
it.
want me to decide that?
And look, we're
You take the heat for
we're
this.
probably wrong.
We are
but-
always wrong. But... All right, boys. All right, we're gonna go listen to some guy tell us he wants to do a higher end coffee shop than what we have right now.